Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councillor Mackey,
Present.
Councillor Gamble,
Present.
Councillor Burley is absent today. Councillor Carlton,
Present.
Councillor McQueen,
Present.
Councillor Desai,
Present.
Councillor Patterson,
Present.
Warden Hicks,
Here.
Councillor Clumpus,
Present.
Councillor Keaveney,
Present.
Councillor Body,
Present.
Councillor O'Leary,
Present.
Councillor Woodbury,
Present.
Councillor Milne,
Present.
Councillor Soever,
Present.
Councillor Bourdignon,
Present.
Councillor Robinson,
Present.
Councillor Hutchinson.
Present.
We have all members here with the exception of Councillor Burley.
So Council, I'm going to ask you to rise, please, so that we can observe a moment of silence in recognition of Remembrance Day. Thank you very much. Next item is our land acknowledgement. And we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the Six Nations of the Grand River, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, Wyandot peoples, on whose traditional territories we gather and whose ancestors signed treaties with our ancestors. We recognize also the Métis and the Inuit, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all of its diverse peoples. Council, is there any declaration of interest, pecuniary or otherwise? Seeing none, I would just say if one does come up during the course of the meeting, I would ask you to declare it at that time. Item 7A is County Council and Committee of the Whole minutes dated October 27th. I'm looking for a mover to put the item on the floor. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Milne. Is there any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Item 7B is the Committee of the Whole closed meeting minutes, which are dated October 27th, 2022. I'm looking for a mover, please. Moves by Councillor Woodbury, seconded by Councillor, not Robinson, Thompson. You know, Hutchison, my apologies. This brain. Okay, we have no discussion. So all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. I apologize, Councillor Hutchison. We have no closed meeting matters, and there's one report. It's the Public Health Grey Bruce Board of Health minutes, which are dated September 23rd, 2022. Dr. Era is with us. Good morning, Dr. Era. I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
Good morning.
We need a mover. Yes, my apologies, Dr. Era. I need to put the item on the floor, which I have not done yet. So moved by Councillor O'Leary and seconded by Councillor Patterson. Dr. Era, you now have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Warding. Good morning, Council. The update from the last board minutes, there are two major updates or main points. One about COVID situation and the other one about the opioid crisis update. So regarding COVID, at the time I updated the board about the surge in the number of cases, a number of outbreaks, hospitalization, almost doubling what we have been experiencing before. We had been experiencing over the past weeks. Today, I'm pleased to report that that surge has been mitigated through the efforts of the partners around the Grey Bruce and the team in the health unit. The number of outbreaks went down in long-term care to 4 after being as high as 10. Similar reduction happened in the number of new cases, hospitalization, and the other variables. We continue to encourage the public to stay up to date with vaccines. The number of vaccination in the community and the number of outbreaks both generate immunity that provide safety for everybody. The health unit continues to support the partner's primary care pharmacy in delivering vaccine, and we provide clinics throughout Grey Bruce, and we'll continue to do this. Regarding the second update, the opioid crisis, I provided the board with an update related to two, I would say, milestones. One is related to the Grey Bruce Health Unit working with Public Health Ontario as a COMO group. COMO is the Council of Medical Officers of Health Working Group, and leading 10 health units. And two of the achievements, short-term achievement, one of them is the data that we received from the Chief Coroner Office. Public Health receives quarterly reports or annual reports and similar reports. Now we receive on weekly basis up-to-date information, even with the weekly line list. Obviously, this would allow us to evaluate the end response quite effectively comparing to previous years, and this will be rolled out or is being rolled out throughout the province. The second update on the same group and the efforts of Dr. Zayed, the credit technically goes to her completely in this achievement. We have been selected, or our proposal have been accepted after quite a competitive submissions for grants related to opioid and the implementing an evidence-based public health approach to health promotion around substance use and preventing substance-related harms among youth in Ontario. That's the title of the proposal. That was granted or selected, and the grant will be around $110,000 that will be utilized for this cause, and hopefully it's going to be first step in many other steps. I'll stop there, Mr. Warden. Open to questions as always.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Ara. Are there any questions from council? I do not see any. So with that said, I'll thank you, Dr. Ara.
Mr. Roden, if I may say one final point. I realize this is the last board, the last council meeting for this council. I just want to thank everybody around the table for their effort on your watch over the past 3 years of this pandemic. Many efforts, many partners have contributed to the cause of managing this emergency. And the council in Grey has been instrumental in leading many of these and coordinating many of these efforts. So on your watch, and not many people, not many councillors across the province or the country can say this, on your watch, Grey Bruce has mitigated the effects of a pandemic that could be devastating, and the effect was minimal, relatively minimal on families in Grey Bruce. Thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, Dr. Aaron, and we thank you as well for your leadership. Okay, where are we now? We're on to bylaws. So we have two bylaws, 5147 and 5148-22. I need a mover to put those bylaws on the floor. I'm going to choose Councillor Bordignon and seconded by Councillor Carleton. Any discussion on those bylaws? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Is there anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. We're on to item 11, good news and celebrations. Councillor Keaveney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden, and good morning, County Council. Two announcements, if I may, this morning. The first on behalf of the Port County Labor Market Planning Board. The Employer One survey has been recently released, November the 1st. And the aim of the survey this year is to understand labor shortages and needs of employers in Grey Bruce, Huron, and Perth counties. The data will be used to develop and promote strategies to help meet the needs of our changing economy. So the survey can be found on the Fort County website and on, I hope, most everyone's Chamber of Commerce websites. And if each community can get 25 responses, then you can get data specific to your own area. And the second announcement I'm very proud to make as a Rotarian in Meaford. Our club is in the process of purchasing the Bethany Church of the Nazarene for the purpose of opening a thrift shop. In the basement, the food bank already exists, and we will open a, as I say, a thrift shop on the main floor. Mental health services are already being hosted there on Wednesday afternoons, and we hope to continue and add more ancillary services to make that a real community hub for Meaford. So very excited on behalf of Meaford Rotary. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Keaveney. I should have mentioned to Council that I know that some people want to make some remarks, and we're going to allow for that at the end of under other business, under Committee of the Whole. Okay. Are there anyone else? Councillor Soever.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. Just like to report that the Events for Life has opened the Events for Life Arena Cafe at the Beaver Valley Community Center. The cafe began operations on Wednesday, November 10th, and we had a grand opening, which I was able to participate in on Tuesday, November 8th. So the cafe will be open Monday to Friday, 11 to 1, and offers a variety of lunch specials, including soups, chilies, sandwiches, hot dogs, muffins, cookies, and coffee. And it's staffed by participants from the Events for Life Center. And this cafe provides all these participants with the opportunity for community work experience and to learn new service skills. So for those of you who don't know, Events for Life is a local organization which provides day programs for individuals with special needs from the surrounding area. So Meaford, Collingwood, as well as the Blue Mountains. And it provides programs that provide social, recreational, and healthy living skills for over 30 participants, with the goal of supporting these individuals so they can live, learn, and work in an integrative and inclusive community. So it's a great program. Many of our people with challenges, once they finish their school years and they become young adults, there's really nothing for them. So Events for Life provides those opportunities for them to have these social and recreational. And the cafe, the snack bar at the arena was not being operated really. I mean, it was leased for a number of years, but they didn't operate that often. And so we decided that's a town that we would work with Events for Life. And now they are staffing it, and the people are having an opportunity to learn service skills. And, you know, I think it's a great collaboration. And, you know, I enjoyed lunch there. And it was half the price of a lunch otherwhere in the Blue Mountains. So it's... If you're passing through the Blue Mountains and you don't want to pay $30 for lunch, just drop by the arena, and the Events for Life people will fix you up for less than half that.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Councillor Carleton.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'd just like to say that this past Tuesday night, Georgian Bluffs had a presentation of the concept designs for the Kimball Arena. And we had a number of residents come out and look at those designs and rework them to what they felt would work better. And that it is now online for any residents who wish to have more say on that matter to go ahead and put comments in. So we would encourage people to do that. But it was great to see how many people showed up to comment on it on Tuesday night. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it. Oh, Councillor Desai.
Thank you, Warden Hicks. On Friday, on the occasion of Remembrance Day, there's 3 services that I know of in Grey Highlands. At 10:45, the Flesh and Markdale Legion Branch 333 is hosting services in Markdale by the municipal offices and in Fleshton at the Cenotaph. The KCA is hosting a service in Kimberley at the community center there at 10:30. I hope people can make it out to that. Last week on Saturday was the Dundalk Little Theatre's presentation of several vignettes. I'd spoken about this at the previous meeting. It was all in for the benefit of the Dundalk Food Bank. I had mentioned at the time that I was the star performer. I still maintain that I was a star performer. There was one member from around this table, my member opposite, that did show up. I don't want his opinion. But the good news part here, Warden Hicks, is that through the sponsorships and sponsorships and DLT's commitment alone, there was over $4,000 raised for the Dundalk Food Bank. And at this point, we hadn't calculated what the gate receipts had been yet. So that would be on top of the $4,000. So I think in my opinion, that's a good news story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. It looks like you're going to get that opinion whether you want it or not. Okay.
You should resist. You should resist.
All right. I'm looking for a mover to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Robinson, seconded by Councillor Clumpus. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We'll just take a second to switch over to Committee of the Whole. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's November 10th. We are now meeting as Committee of the Whole. I call this meeting to order. Is there any declaration of interest, pecuniary or otherwise? Seeing none, I will again say, if one does come up during the course of the meeting, I would ask you to declare it at that time. We have no business arising from the minutes, and we have no delegations. And so we're out now dealing with the consent agenda. Is there anything that needs to be pulled, Council? Then I'm going to ask for a mover to approve the consent agenda, moved by Councillor Keaveney and seconded by Councillor McQueen. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, we're on to item 7A, just dealing with Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act and associated consultations. I need a mover to put the item on the floor, moved by Councillor Hutchison and seconded by Councillor Mackey. I don't know if it's Scott. I've got Kim and Randy here. Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Warden, and good morning to Warden and County Council. So I've got good news and bad news here for you this morning. The good news is we've only got one report for discussion. The bad news is it's quite a lengthy one, but we'll try to keep this concise and touch on some of the high points of the proposed legislation and regulatory changes. For some reason, the slide's not changing. Sorry about that. Okay, on October 25th, the province released a number of proposed legislative changes and some other regulatory and guidance document changes, collectively sort of under the name of Bill 23, the More Homes Built Faster Act. The report, as I said, is quite lengthy. It touches on a number of pieces of legislation that might most directly impact the County of Grey and our member municipalities, as well as touching on some of those other proposed regulatory changes. There's a number of changes whereby the province is seeking comments by late November on, which is why we put it on this agenda. And there's some further changes they're seeking comments by the end of the year on. So there'll be another report at the December 8th meeting of County Council. I will say in preparing this report, it was a team effort. We had staff from a number of different departments, including finance and legal services and planning and the CAO and deputy CAO, all working on this report because it does impact potentially so many of the county's roles in this regard. We also had some great discussions with member municipal staff, and we had a meeting of the municipal planners last week, as well as inviting a few of our conservation authorities. So there's a lot of broad input that's gone into preparing what you see before you today. So with respect to a very general overview, we want to make it clear that the county really wants to work with the province, work with our municipalities, and work with the development community to address housing issues in Ontario. Certainly, there's lots of positive changes in Bill 23, and I certainly don't want to make it sound like county staff are playing Chicken Little here and the sky is falling. There's some good stuff in here. That said, we believe there are some changes proposed that could have some unintended consequences, and they could end up being problematic to the county municipalities and the conservation authorities. And there are some changes there that we think might not have the intended goal of seeing more homes built quicker. We would note that even aside from the proposed changes in the legislation and the regulatory changes, there are existing workforce issues and infrastructure deficit issues that further compound the ability to see more homes built quicker. And these workforce and infrastructure deficit issues not only affect the county and municipalities, but they also impact those trades that we'll be calling upon to build these homes going forward across the province. One of the keys that county staff see here to success will be ensuring that it's not just more homes built quicker, but specifically the right kind and type of homes. And we really want to push for more affordable homes and more attainable homes in this regard, because we think that's a key social infrastructure building block to our communities in that regard. So with respect to some of the most notable changes, there's a number of changes to the Development Charges Act that would impact a county or municipal ability to collect development charges to fund future growth-related costs. Most notably, Bill 23 is proposing a series of exemptions which would exempt affordable and attainable housing from the need to pay development charges. And certainly that is good in theory, and the county is already conditionally exempting purpose-built rental housing. But with where they've drawn the line in Bill 23 to suggest that affordable equals anything at 80% or less of average market value, we see some challenges there. And so if we take a hypothetical example of a municipality where the average market value is $1 million, that would mean that the affordable price is anything $800,000 and less. And so for those units, those ownership units that are $800,000 and yet or less, they would no longer need to pay development charges. And while that is definitely more affordable than $1 million, we see a big gap between the income and housing needs in our community and that 80% of market value. So we are asking that the province reconsider this and maybe look at a slightly different definition there, and perhaps a definition that could tie those values back to income in that regard. We would also note that the tracking of these exemptions can be quite onerous, either on county staff or municipal staff, and it could relate, or it could mean the need for increased staffing or more staff time spent there. We are recommending the province that they consider a standardized process rather than having to go through the agreements registered on title process as we do currently. And then finally, I'd note with respect to that 80% value, which applies to both applies to both ownership and rental housing, the province has noted that they'll be issuing a bulletin on pricing so that municipalities and counties can determine the full price and then subsequently the 80% price. We would simply request to the province that if they are going to be issuing this bulletin, we see great need for it to be granular. So simply issuing a bulletin for a wide region might be undercounting or overcounting the price variances across those regions. So even across the County of Grey, we see great difference between our municipalities. And we would also request that that bulletin be issued fairly frequently because over the last number of years, we have seen very big swings in price differences across the county. With respect to some of the other development charges changes, they're recommending that there be automatic discounts for purpose-built rental units, whereby those discounts are graduated. So a 1-bedroom unit gets a small discount and a 3-bedroom unit would get a greater discount. We are requesting that there should be some more municipal flexibility here based on the fact that in the earlier changes, we're already exempting development charges for purpose-built rentals that are affordable or attainable. So we think there should be some flexibility to allow municipalities to really target where they want to issue some of those discounts, and maybe municipalities would consider only issuing those discounts in times of great need where you might have very low vacancy rates and as opposed to just being automatic. There are further changes which look to a reduction in development charges when a municipality passes a new development charges bylaw. So for the first 4 years of that bylaw, those development charges would be phased in. And again, we'd simply flag here that this could mean less DC revenue, even in some cases than the last year of your former bylaw. There's also further requirements for municipalities to spend or allocate 60% of the monies in a development charge reserve fund at the beginning of each year for water supply services, wastewater services, and roads. County staff would like to see some clarification here, specifically with respect to the term allocate. As council may know that a lot of development charges are used to fund bigger projects, and they're not something you could spend in a given year. So if you're saving up for a new wastewater treatment plant or a wastewater treatment upgrade, that takes a number of years. And based on the way development charges are currently structured and the fact that the development charges are based on detailed projects outlined in the development charge background study, we'd really like to push the province to consider what that term allocate means in this context and how it would be done on an annual basis. We see some merit in having allocate in there, but certainly spending 60% each year would make development charges untenable for a lot of the projects we use them for. And then there's further regulatory changes which would look at ineligible services for development charge collection in that regard. Most notable to the County of Grey is that we'd no longer be able to collect for our own housing services in that regard and or for background studies like a development charge background study in the future. With respect particularly to the housing services, we see this as a big impediment to getting future county housing built. The County of Simcoe did some analysis. They estimated over the next 10 years, it would be a $68 million hit to their county housing funding in that regard, and that would equate to approximately a $3,153 reduction in a development charge for a single detached dwelling. So I think Simcoe's point in that regard is it will be a nominal decrease in the development charge for a single detached dwelling, but it will have a major impact on a county's ability to provide county-owned and run housing in that regard. So our big comment here with respect to development charges is we see great potential for it to impact municipal and county revenue sources in that regard. And if those revenue sources are impacted, it would mean having to put those fees back onto the general tax levy and or looking at cuts to services or cuts to some of the growth related infrastructure that we'd otherwise be looking to fund to support this new housing that the province is asking us all to support. With respect to some of the changes to the Planning Act, they're looking at limiting third-party appeals to the Ontario Land Tribunal. So this would basically mean that members of the public could no longer appeal on official plans, official plan amendments, zoning amendments, consents, minor variances, etc. We see this as a mixed blessing in that regard. Certainly, it may result in less tribunal hearings, but we do see members of the public and community groups then placing more pressure on municipal staff and municipal councils. In some cases, might even be advocating for municipal councils to refuse files, knowing that they don't have that possibility to appeal after the fact. So we do see this as potentially an impediment to our new municipal councils coming in, just based on getting this level of community pressure, and it could result in further delays at the staff or council level, which again, don't go to that end goal of getting housing built quicker. They've also introduced as of right permissions for up to 3 residential units per property when you're in a settlement area, per residential property, when you're in a settlement area that's serviced by municipal water and sewers. Staff are generally supportive of this, but we noted that in speaking with municipal staff, there will be some implementation hiccups here, particularly as it relates to servicing infrastructure. And certainly for new developments, what we heard from the building officials is it's much more efficient to install those lines for new construction. But when someone's going in to retrofit an existing unit to put in, say, 2 additional residential units, it can mean that you need to upgrade some of those services, and there can be some added costs there that wouldn't otherwise be foreseen. The province is also looking at making changes to inclusionary zoning, and just for council's refresher, inclusionary zoning is the provincial tool that would allow a municipality to require X percentage of affordable housing going forward. In this case, county staff are still advocating that the province consider opening up inclusionary zoning powers across the province, and that it not be limited to major transit station areas and those municipalities that have a development permit system in place. Other changes which don't impact the county as directly definitely impact your municipal tables with respect to some of the proposed changes to parkland dedication. This allows developers to identify the land they wish to convey to the municipality for parkland purposes, and it can now be land that's encumbered by easements or other restrictions in that regard. If a municipality refuses to accept what the developer has offered in that regard, it can go to the OLT. And again, we see this as a challenge because it could result in delays if municipalities are having to fight these OLT fights in that regard. And it could also mean that municipalities are feeling pressured to take land that's otherwise not suitable for parks. And I'd say just from a general planning perspective, when we're looking at increased density, when we're looking at more houses, and when we're looking at the lessons learned from the pandemic, these outdoor public spaces are really, really crucial to our communities. And we saw the level of use throughout the pandemic. So we really hope that there'll be some changes proposed here such that municipalities can continue to offer those quality outdoor spaces that contribute to the quality of life of our communities. There's other changes proposed that would designate the regions across the province, as well as Simcoe County, as upper tiers without any planning responsibilities. So this would remove their development approvals. This would remove their official plans. County staff have spoken to some others across the province, and I think the recommendation here from planners anyway is that the province consider revising this, and perhaps it's not the removal of upper tier planning responsibilities, but maybe a limitation on upper tier planning responsibilities. Certainly across Grey County, we see the ability for greater streamlining, even though we're not one of the upper tiers that's being impacted at this time. There's certainly things on the development approval side that we can work to streamline with our member municipalities. We've got a local planners meeting scheduled for next Friday to discuss some of those streamlining options. But we do still see an upper tier role for the regions and for Simcoe County when it comes to things like growth management and things such as natural heritage system planning, which really do cross municipal boundaries and make more sense arguably at a regional or county scale than it would having each municipality operate like an island in that regard. There's some further changes to site plan control that would exempt any new residential development of 10 units or less from needing site plan control. There's some changes with respect to land lease developments and further changes that limit municipalities' ability to apply site plan control to architectural or sustainable design details. Certainly in our conversations with municipal planners, they did see some challenges here. And particularly at the county level, the limitations on sustainable design details greatly impact a municipality's ability to implement a climate change mitigation or adaptation strategy. And the county was looking at developing some green development standards, and we see this as potentially a barrier to implementing those standards in that regard. With respect to some of the Conservation Authority Act changes, the province is further focusing the Conservation Authority's role purely on natural hazard planning. And so conservation authorities will no longer be able to comment on natural heritage for development proposals and applications. We see this as a major impact to a number of rural counties and municipalities across the province, because by and large, counties and municipalities don't have a biologist or ecologist on staff that would have this expertise. So it would mean that places like the County of Grey or some of our member municipalities might need to hire additional staff with this expertise. Certainly in speaking with our 4 conservation authorities across Grey, they've noted that currently natural heritage planning is largely done across 36 conservation authorities in the province, and having that shift to 444 municipalities could result in less efficient services and more delays in that regard. Certainly the other thing we'd point out is that natural heritage and natural hazard planning are not mutually exclusive. So if you have a conservation authority planner going out to a site to investigate the natural hazard, looking at wetlands, and then you have a county or municipal planner or ecologist going out to that same site to look at natural heritage, then we see the potential for duplication and delays there. So what the message we're advocating for here is that the province should consider allowing the current system to continue, whereby natural hazards are mandatory services for our conservation authorities. Natural heritage are optional services where a municipality has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the conservation authority. The message that county staff and conservation authorities would put out there is there's nobody forcing anybody to sign one of these non-mandatory MOUs. So if you've determined across your county or your municipality that you would like the conservation authorities to provide these services, then they should still be allowed to provide those services. There's further changes which also exempt conservation authority permits where there's already been a planning application. We see this as additional burden on municipalities that then are required to implement what otherwise would have been in that conservation authority permit. And some municipalities may not be equipped to take that on, or it might mean more staffing. The idea of further freezing conservation authority fees could result in greater municipal levy requests for funding their operations and staff, or it could result in slower service delivery from our conservation authority planners on development projects in that regard. And overall, I think the message we've heard from a number of our conservation authorities is that they request that the province reinitiate the multi-sector working group that was set up earlier in the term of the Ford government to look at changes to the conservation authorities. We heard a lot of good comments about the work that multi-sector group was doing, and there's the thought that these changes should be run through that group before consideration of passing. With respect to some of the other changes, there's some further changes to the Ontario Land Tribunal, which I think county staff are generally in support of. There could be increased costs to a party that loses at a hearing. We would like some clarification on what that means in that regard. There's increased authority to dismiss an appeal, and there's increased ability for the Attorney General to prioritize the scheduling of hearings. And so if we're reading between the lines on the government's initiatives in that regard, that prioritization of scheduling would probably be for high priority housing projects over some other projects in that regard. There are some changes proposed to the Municipal Act that we have concerns with respect to limiting a municipality's ability to pass a bylaw that regulates the conversion or demolishing of rental units. Certainly, we see rental as a key component of our housing continuum going forward, and particularly if there's further thought that some of these rental units will be converted either to condominium style ownership or converted to short-term accommodations. We think municipalities need to remain in control there. There's some changes to the Ontario Heritage Act that don't directly impact the County of Grey, but a number of our member municipalities have spoken out on with respect to the criteria for listing a property and some new imposed timeframes in that regard. And then finally, there's some changes to the proposed Ontario wetland evaluation system that would further delete the conservation authorities on the ground role in that regard. And it would allow wetlands to be assessed in isolation rather than as part of a greater wetland complex. We see both conservation authorities and our wetlands as being absolutely crucial going forward to strategies for climate change mitigation and adaptation. And if anything, we need to be doing more to protect them, not potentially opening them up to further challenge in that regard. So with respect to some of the next steps, there are committee meetings being held before the standing committee right now, though they're asking for comments or oral deputations to the committee by November 17th, 2022. The ERO postings for the most part are generally due by November 24th. And as I said, there's further proposed reviews of the provincial policy statement, the place to grow, which is due by the end of the year. And that'll be another staff report to committee on December the 8th. So just to conclude here, we really want to work with the province to look at further opportunities to streamline our processes to get more housing built. We applaud the province for taking action in this regard, and we want to work to hopefully help refine some of the changes in Bill 23, but also to look forward and see more housing being built in that regard. We do see some of these proposed changes as being either administratively burdensome for municipalities or financially burdensome, which could impact a municipality's ability to plan for and provide the infrastructure needed to support this growth going forward. We're also worried that some of the proposed changes might see more housing being built, but it might not necessarily be the type of housing we need across our community. And so we're really trying to advocate for any solutions that would result in more affordable housing and more attainable housing in this regard, and seeking to see a change in that definition to affordable housing such that it's not just 80% of market value. So with that, there's a rather wordy recommendation that recommends council receive this report, that we forward on the comments to both the province through the ERO postings and also to the standing committee, and that this report be shared with municipalities and conservation authorities, and that we proceed with forwarding these documents ahead of the December 8th county council in order to meet the province's timelines in that regard. With that, I will turn it over to any questions. Thank you.
Wow, well done. Well done. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. And Scott, thank you very much for the detailed report and presentation. Very much appreciated. So my comments and my question is in relation to paragraph 3 of the recommendation. So I know firsthand how effective and important it is to be a delegation in front of the provincial standing committees. In fact, I was a delegation for the Standing Committee on Finance. So with that, in paragraph 3, it talks about sending the written comments to the Standing Committee on Heritage, Infrastructure and Cultural Policy. Is there an opportunity for a delegation, whether it's through electronic means or in person, to actually be a delegation in front of the Standing Committee to articulate the findings and the comments and the recommendations of this report, recognizing the success and that I experienced, and I'm just imparting that here to Grey County. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Robinson, and through you, Mr. Warden. So staff were maybe perhaps a little presumptive in this regard. We have requested a deputation before the Standing Committee. The deadline for putting in those deputation requests was yesterday. So we have put that in. We suspect there's going to be a number of people requesting such deputations. So we're not counting our chickens that we will actually get that deputation. But we thought at the minimum we could put in the request, and then if council didn't see fit to move forward with such a deputation, we could always withdraw our request. I know the town of Blue Mountains was nice enough to invite us to a meeting yesterday, which included 2 local MPPs, and I believe the town also announced that they're submitting a deputation request as well. So hopefully some voices will be heard from this area, and our 2 MPPs were very receptive to the comments that were being put forward by the town and the county there.
Thank you for the follow-up on that. And I'm wondering, Mr. Warden, is there a need to amend the motion to include approval or permission or support from Grey County Council for staff and whoever else that is necessary to be a delegation in front of the Standing Committee? Thank you.
My apologies. It seems to be covered by the recommendations already before you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Soever?
Yes, thank you, Scott, for the presentation. There's certainly a lot to cover there. And I want to thank Scott and Randy and Kim for coming to our meeting with the two MPPs yesterday. This bill puts the burden of the attainable housing on the local municipality's taxpayer. And we did point out to the MPPs, that this is not making any housing any more affordable. For instance, in the town of Blue Mountains, if we lose 30% of our tax revenue because of exemptions, our 30% of our DC revenue due to exemptions, that would be $3.6 million a year. And if we made that up through taxation, that would be a 20% increase in taxes roughly. So, maybe the capital cost of the house goes down if, and it's a big if the developer passes on that DC relief to the buyer. I suspect it'll probably go to profit, but if that happens and taxes are 20% higher every year, it's just moving something from capital to operating. And so it doesn't make housing any more affordable. What it does is it just moves the, part of the purchase price, if the developer passes it on, to taxes that the owner would pay every year. And so what we've suggested is, why don't you look to where the money really is? In the town of Blue Mountains, we collect $18 million of property tax a year, but the housing market in the Blue Mountains, last year we sold 400 houses at somewhere between $1.2 and $1.5 million each. So that's somewhere between $480 to $600 million. So one of the things that we're suggesting is, if you're going to give DC relief to some types of housing, then you should be allowed to calculate your DCs by using, when you do your DC study, not the total growth, but the DC eligible growth only. So basically, if your growth is 10,000 units, but 30% of them are not DC eligible anymore under this bill, you would only be dividing the capital by 7,000 units. So if we did that in the Blue Mountains, that would increase DCs on a single family home by about $12,000, which amounts to, when it's a $1.5 million house, that's less than 1% of the cost of the house. So it doesn't really move the needle for the high end buyer, but certainly I don't think it's feasible to finance this DC relief through taxation, because it's not really doing anything for affordability. So we're going to speak to that when we go down, if we get selected. We've got a number of applications in from a number of different groups, including our Attainable Housing Corporation. So maybe one of us will sneak through the filter. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Councillor Mackey?
Thanks, Mr. Warden. Good morning, County Council. Thanks very much, Scott. Early on in your presentation, you talked about the as of right permissions in the residential areas. Is there anything in Bill 23 speaking about rural lots and the as of right permissions there?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mackey, for your question through you, Mr. Warden. So Bill 23 specifically introduces a new definition to the Planning Act, which essentially speaks to a piece of residential land in an urban service settlement area. So one of the things that we put in the report that I neglected to say in my presentation is we'd like some clarification from the province to maybe not necessarily allow for as of right, but still allow the municipalities the ability to have the autonomy to allow for such units in our smaller settlement areas, so our villages and our towns that don't have full municipal services, as well as in our rural areas. We have seen uptake on this over the years. In some cases, some municipalities permit it as of right. Other municipalities require a zoning amendment, but we have seen a number of additional residential units proposed in privately serviced communities. And so just very briefly, sorry, I believe at the beginning of the presentation, I neglected to also thank Mary Lou and her team. Certainly understanding the finance ramifications of the proposed changes has been very important, and they've been very helpful there as well. So I apologize. Hopefully that answers your question, but if not, I'm happy to address it further.
I don't see any other hands, so perhaps it's time to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Scott. Okay, we are now on item number 8. And I'm going to be looking for a mover to move us into closed session to deal with the litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative, tribunals. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Gamble. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So we'll just take a second to